We see fascism taking over our lives, our television sets, our public discourse, and where we see institutions crumbling down. Today, silence has got so normalized that it has become the face of excess. Today, the left means dignity of the worker. It means the rights of the peasant, emancipation of women, the annihilation of caste. For the left, the independence was not just a momentary moment. It was a process to be built, and I think it is still an ongoing struggle. It found among them women whose labor, paid and unpaid, and emotional labor, again unpaid, remains systematically undervalued. I'm deeply honored to be invited by this prestigious literature festival, the KeralaLegislature International Book Festival. There's a lot of excitement in the air, and as I was just coming in, I saw how principally Kerala Legislative Assembly has openly stood in solidarity for Venezuela. And that is what the spirit of the red thread stands for. Perhaps Kerala understands more than anywhere else in the country that democracy is sustained not just by institutions, but by ideas, by debate, by discourse, by discussion, and through a collective struggle. It is in that very spirit of shared thinking and common purpose that I address you today. Dear friends, we live in an era where political discourse is increasingly defined by silence. We've seen how the muzzling of silence, of dissenters, of anyone who's speaking against the powers of to be have to pay a very, very heavy price, and sometimes years of silence in jail. Today, silence has got so normalized that it has become the face of excess. Silence in the face of prejudice, silence in the face of systematic erasure. This, my friends, is not just a misunderstanding. It is a cultivated silence that makes injustice looks like normal everyday routine. Today's silence makes cruelty look like good governance. And silence makes people feel alone with their pain. And that loneliness, my friends, is the oldest instrument of control. So today, I'm going to speak about reclaiming the discourse. How a strong left can offer India a real political narrative. Today, left is not just a relic of the past or a museum piece. It is an exercise in self-congratulation, and I feel we need to congratulate the left, not because of the dedicals electorally in West Bengal or Tripura, but what it actually stands for. Today, left is giving direction to a lot of people who are lost in the noise. You switch on your TV every day at 9 p.m. and you hear anchors in screeching voices trying to change the political narrative of the country. So what does it mean when the left is pushed out of power? And what does it come back actually demand of, especially now, in a situation where we see fascism taking over our lives, our television sets, our public discourse, and where we see institutions crumbling down. So to understand the Indian left, we must begin with a fact that is often camouflaged or hidden by propagandists. So left did not arrive late to the idea of freedom. There must be a lot of people who must have told or asked you, but left did not play a pivotal role in the Indian freedom struggle. My dear friends, when we talk about the Indian freedom struggle, let's remember a very integral name to start with. That is Comrade Shahid Bhagat Singh. Today we see the right wing trying to usurp his legacy. for want of leaders, because the right wing does not have leaders of its own. So what do they say? They say Shahid Bhagat Singh is our own, or they say that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose belongs to us. It's very important, dear friends, to nip the bud and tell them exactly where they belong, where the thought orientation took off from, where the inspiration came from, what the thoughts, legacy, the writings, their work actually talked about. So here, it is very important to talk about liberation that is more than just a red flag. Today, the left means dignity of the worker. It means the rights of the peasant, emancipation of women, the annihilation of caste, and the building of institutions that served the many rather than a few. So, my dear friends, the left's understanding of freedom was shaped by revolutionary and freedom fighters. Like I've already told you, that Bhagat Singh understood with extraordinary clarity that independence without socialism is a lost cause. A lot of leaders did not premeditate. They only thought that fighting with the British would mean emancipation. But Bhagat Singh, Shahid Bhagat Singh, went a step further. He actually talked about political freedom, irrespective of who was ruling. And that had to be accompanied by economic and social transformation. And I think we need to give cognizance to Shahid Bhagat Singh's revolutionary spirit that made him see that at that age. Then along with Comrade Bhagat Singh, we had Shurja Sen. We all have heard of the Chittagong uprising. It reflected the left's refusal to separate anti-imperialism from class mobilization. The last year, communist organizers, we had Muzaffar Ahmad, who helped build a working class diaspora rooted in Indian conditions rather than borrowed abstractions. Now, we are told that the left was simply an intellectual current. Now, how do we do that when the political parties and institutions that say that left is now just relegated to the relic of the past and it's just an intellectual stream? So we need to debunk that idea and tell them that the left's deepest roots were organizational. I think there's no other force that has a systematic organizational structure in place than the left in India. We have had unions, we've had mass fronts, because the left understood something very, very simple, that a hungry individual can be silenced. An organized community is harder to ignore. In that organizational ethic, the left differed from elite nationalism. What did elite nationalism ask for? The elite nationalism imagined that the nation as a single moral family. The left asked a sharper question. They asked, what does a nation serve? And who pays for its glory? This organizational politics found expression in the earlier communist movement under leaders like Mr. P.C. Joshi, who emphasized that mass fronts, trade unions, and peasant organizations are as essential as the Indian freedom struggle. For the left, the independence was not just a momentary moment. It was a process to be built, and I think it is still an ongoing struggle. That is why the colonial state treated communists and dissenters as threats. So the left became unpopular with those who benefited from hierarchical legacies. And it made the natural voice of the downtrodden forgotten and ignored. Because it refused to treat suffering as mere fate or something that has been passed on from generations. It treated suffering as a product of power and therefore as something that could be changed. When the left stood for the rights of the workers, it was not importing just a foreign script. It was reading India as it was, a society where labor was abundant and cheap, where caste and gender were used to keep it that way, and where the poor were expected to accept their poverty as culture. The left's insistence that poverty was political was a direct attack on that very, very same principle. After we attained independence, a lot of people declared that now the freedom is complete. The left insisted that history needs to be changed. Why? Because it felt that it had changed nothing. Just because we've attained freedom, it doesn't mean that we are done away with caste, that we have done away with class. Now, how do we put caste and class and broaden the umbrella was a much bigger question. Now, political freedom without social and economic justice was incomplete freedom. The left continued to represent the marginalized, the oppressed, not as a rhetoric flourish, but as an organizing principle. In the decades after independence, this insistence produced concrete outcomes. It produced demands for land reform, as we saw in the state of West Bengal, where feudal relations survived under new names. It produced struggles for fair wages, where industrialization expanded without dignity. It produced a politics of public education that treated literacy not as personal achievement, but as a democratic infrastructure. It produced a politics of public health that recognized that a sick citizen is not a free citizen. It produced a politics of food security because hunger is not a private tragedy. Comrades, friends, and ladies and gentlemen, it is a public failure. Let's talk about the national level. Post-independence, the left leadership carried this tradition forward. We had leaders such as Ajay Ghosh and later Harkrishan Singh, Surjit, who worked to ensure that parliamentary politics did not replace mass struggle, but extended it. For the left, the entry into the state legislatures was not about normalizing power. It was about changing it and challenging it from within. And that is why the left did not just protest, it also governed. It governed in Kerala, it governed in West Bengal, it governed in Tripura. These governments across these various states were not identical. No state is, because it would just become a carbon copy of the other, right? It has its own intrinsic identity. However, all these states that were governed by the left all had one abiding principle, the idea that the state has a responsibility to expand human capabilities, not merely facilitate markets. So the story of the left in Kerala is often told in its headlines: literacy, health, decentralization. But behind those headlines is a deeper political message that the left did not simply deliver schemes. It changed what people believed, that the state owned them. It made citizens expect the state to show up in their lives, not as a policeman and not as a tax collector alone, but as a guarantor of capability. That shift in expectation is one of the most profound achievements of any democratic politics. In Kerala, that foundation, you would know that better than me. The foundation became visible in the most concrete ways. Politics, rooted in the common citizen, strengthened the public education and the health. It built literacy. It drove public health schemes. It treated land reforms and decentralization not as technocratic periods, but as democratic necessities. It built the idea, rare in Indian politics, that welfare is not charity. And that rights do not depend on a citizen's purchasing power. Kerala's left tradition was carried forward by many, many leaders who combined ideological clarity with administrative courage. EMS Namudripad understood that democracy could not survive if the masses remain uneducated, unhealthy, and economically insecure. A.K. Gopalan, whose life was shaped by imprisonment and resistance. P. Krishna Pillai laid the organizational foundations of communism in Kerala under conditions of intense repression. Later, E.K. Nayanar showed that left governance could be firm without being authoritarian and principled without being sectarian. In West Bengal and Tripura, left governments were built with the same conviction that the marginalized must become visible to the state. Unlike Jyoti Basu, land reform and panchayat democracy fundamentally altered rural power relations in Bengal. In Tripura, leaders such as Nripan Chakrabarti and later Manik Sarkar demonstrated that even resource-poor states could prioritize social security, peace, and inclusion over spectacle. Dear friends, history does not reward those who stop listening. Outside Kerala, the left lost direction in many, many ways and lost ground. Not because exploitation disappeared, not because inequality ended, not because the terrain changed. And the left did not always change its language, its forms, and its imagination quickly enough. Neoliberalism, capitalism did not abolish oppression. It rebranded it. Workers became partners. Precarity became flexibility. The collapse of stable employment became entrepreneurship. The dismantling of public goods became choice. Politics itself was reduced to management. The claim that there was no alternative, only best practices, that ideology is outdated, only efficiency matters. The citizens should behave like consumers and measure life by purchasing power was just a fallacy that was being peddled out. Neoliberalism also did something particularly clever. It did not only change the economy, it changed the language. It told people to think of themselves as individual projects. It told them that success is private and failure is personal. It told them that public goods are inefficient and that privatization is modern. It told them that rights are expensive and that debt is normal. That is why the left's crisis in many regions are not only electoral, it was linguistic. The left allowed its opponents to colonize that imagination. It allowed the market to present itself as a common sense. It allowed inequality to disguise itself as merit. And as that narrative spread, the left often sounded defensive. It became careful when politics demanded courage. It became procedural when politics demanded narrative. It became comfortable with internal language when it needed to speak in a language people recognized as their own. And through the last lessons of the last 3 decades, you do not lose only because you're wrong. I think that was a very important lesson. You lose because you allow your opponent to tell the more compelling story. Neoliberalism did not win because it was humane. It won because it packaged ambition into a simple narrative and made exploitation feel like aspiration. But the left story did not end here, because capitalism did not produce only winners. It produced enormous populations living under new forms of insecurity. The traditional working class did not disappear. It was fragmented. The rural poor did not vanish. They were pushed into migration. The small trader and the petty producer did not become secure. They became squeezed between corporate concentration and unstable demand. Even when the left lost electoral power, it did not abandon the oppressed. It simply found them in new places. Because capitalism produced new forms of vulnerability, the left continued, sometimes quietly and sometimes loudly, to represent the new oppressed in the neoliberal order. It found informal workers whose labor powers the economy, but who are denied security. It found amongst them contractual workers who do the same work as permanent workers for half the rights. It found among them migrants who build cities and are treated as temporary bodies. It found among them students who are told to compete compete, and then blamed when the promised jobs do not exist. It found among them women whose labor, paid and unpaid, and emotional labor, again unpaid, remains systematically undervalued. It found among them minorities who are placed under constant suspicion and the pressure to prove their loyalty to the country, and the citizenship made to feel conditional. So now let's talk about some positivity. What about the great comeback? If the left has to come back, it must begin by naming these realities honestly. It must also begin by recognizing that identity and class cannot be separate in practice. The worker is not a neutral body. The worker is marked by caste, by gender, by religion, by region. When the left fails to recognize these marks, it leaves space for reactionary forces to weaponize them. When the left recognizes them and links them to material justice, it builds solidarity that is not sentimental, but structural. That is why, my dear friends, secularism matters as much as material politics. Secularism is not only a constitutional principle, it is a condition under which workers can organize across religious lines without religious discrimination. Communalism is not just religious hatred. It is a method to break the solidarity between the working class. It turns neighbors into enemies so that wages can be suppressed without collective resistance. It turns anger sideways away from those who profit. So when we speak of communalism today, we must be very clear. It is not an accidental cultural mode. It is an organized political economy. It keeps busy a lot of people fighting over identity, where public assets are transferred very, very quietly and in a very subdued way. It makes citizens, fellow humans, suspicious of one another. And while the very idea of social citizenship is being dismantled. And at this juncture, at this very important, crucial point, midway through this entire left's political journey, not just the beginning, through the process, and now, I want to mention my book that I've written. It is titled Comrades and Comebacks, published by Penguin. I felt that there was no left literature at airports, in bookstores, and at public spaces, because I felt that the whole intellectual diaspora is being hijacked by the right wing of the country, and I felt it is imperative to write a book that sets the narrative straight. It is not perfect. However, the intention is perfect. The intention was to bring the left where it belongs, in the hands of curious readers, in the hands of people who are inquisitive about the left in India, its journey, their participation in the Indian political freedom, and how left won the states in Kerala, West Bengal, Tripura. What was the journey like? What is the objective here on? Why did it lose West Bengal? Why did it lose Tripura? And what is the future perspective of the left? What does the new left look like? I wrote it because the left's decline is narrated as inevitability. Wo to hona hi tha, that was bound to happen. That is what people say, right? And it becomes very politically convenient for those who benefit from this inequality. I wrote it because I wanted to look at the left's failures, not someone as an insider, someone as an outsider, insider, so that I could do a pragmatic job of what happened in the left's history of India. When we look at the geopolitics of India today, we are living through an economic and political moment where inequality has become structural and shameless. We've seen so many judgments over the years, which looks as if, we look at law that a lot of people would say has become inequitable, or something is just not right. Now, what happens is that wealth accumulates at the top of speeds that would have been unimaginable a generation ago, while secure employment collapses below. We are told that economy is growing and we have become like the 5th greatest nation that is booming economically and all of that. And in some narrow measures, the question is growing for whom? And at what cost? That is a big question. Chronic capitalism is not just something that is whispered today, it is today worn like a badge. Public assets are privatized in the name of efficiency, and then citizens are charged high prices for what is built with public money. Labor protections are dismantled, workers are told to accept insecurity as modernity. The informal sector is vast, but his workers are treated as if they're outside the social contract. In the cities, the gig economy has been presented as innovation. But innovation, ladies and gentlemen, without rights is simply a new method of extraction and exploitation. The gig worker idea in traffic and heat deliver goods that sustain urban life and is denied the basic securities that earlier generations fought for. Predictable wages, health coverage, compensation for injury, the right to organize. He is being called an entrepreneur, but he has none of the freedoms of an entrepreneur, and I'm iterating that. He bears all the risks. Today there's a guy, you decide to order food on Swiggy or Zomato, and you say that the food will be delivered in 10 minutes. Do we even take a moment to think that the person who's literally running through the traffic, be it hailstorm, be it rain, but he ensures that that package is delivered to you, he doesn't actually have any workers' rights. He's simply a gig worker. What about his rights then? He's bearing all the risks. While platforms, so many platforms, I'm not naming them, you know it more than me, right? These are the ones who are making maximum profit from these gig workers who are called entrepreneurs these days. So ladies and gentlemen, this is not freedom. It is outsourcing responsibility downward. And in the countryside, the agrarian distresses continues. The farmer is praised in slogans, Hamara Kisan, Hamara this, Hamara that, and all of that. What about their rights? Market volatility is treated as natural. When farmers protest, they're looked at as anti-nationals. And they are not met with dialogue, they're met with suspicion and delegitimization. Alongside this economic architecture of inequality, we are living through a political architecture of fear, hatred, suspicion of the other. We are told our enemy is a neighbor. Sometimes we are told our enemy is from within. So how do we fight these very divisive forces that are hell-bound on dividing the country on communal lines, on class lines, on division lines, on class lines? So minorities are, today constantly faced under suspicion even more than what it was, say, 40 years ago or 50 years ago. Today, violence, bulldozers, that was earlier considered an instrument of power, of strength, is being seen as an instrument of subjugation. Today, if you need to intimidate someone, you show a bulldozer. And you tell people that, this bulldozer is going to come down and mow down your house, is going to mow your apartment, is going to mow down your shop, is going to mow down everything that you have fundamentally built brick over years. And this has been so normalized and institutionalized that today, when we see a bulldozer mowing down someone's house, someone's shop, we do not think twice and step back and think that his entire lifetime of earnings is being crushed under that bulldozer, brick to brick, mortar to mortar, dust to dust. So the easiest way to prevent collective resistance is to divide the people. To criminalize dissent, we saw what happened, with the bail hearing a couple of days ago. Some people were released, and people are clapping for these people. But what was the ruling? That these people need to spend another year in jail before they can actually apply for another bail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, tell me, some of our brightest minds are in jail today Why? Because they spoke up. They were some of the most fearless voices in the country. They were scholars. They were not terrorists. They were not people who were armed. They were simply protesting what was called a very legitimized struggle of the people against a draconian law. And it's unfortunate that it's happening in the country today. How many of you remember, the picture of Comrade Brinda Karat, who stood against the bulldozer, holding the Supreme Court notice? She stopped the bulldozer in its track. And I think that is very symbolic of the left, that left has stood for and voiced concerns with people who are so disenfranchised, and it has so much of moral clarity to stand for those who are impoverished, who do not have rights, their political parties who don't have the guts or the courage enough to back them. So now when we talk about bulldozers, when these bulldozers run into neighborhoods, they go around demolishing homes with the speed that due process never enjoys, we should recognize the symbolism behind it. That law is selective, that punishment can precede trial, the spectacle can replace procedure. So we know what happened in Jahangirpuri, and it was Brinda Karat who, with that entire machinery and all that going on, she actually brought in the Supreme Court stay order. And that image has somehow struck with me, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a powerful image. And it is, I think, a metaphor for what the left should be in our present circumstances. A physical barrier between the vulnerable citizens and lawless power. A political force willing to stand, not merely to comment. So basically the idea is talking the talk and really meaning what we say, not just putting out a tweet out there and using it for, a rhetorical statement. So this is what I said. If we continue to be the last flag or the last of the Mohicans who are standing against the tide, we need to practice this in our solidarity. Because the left remains the only political force that officially and unapologetically names the crisis. It does not pivot for optics, it pivots for justice. It has become fashionable to say that we live in a post-ideological age. It is complete nonsense. There's nothing post-ideological about corporate tax waivers, about labor codes pushed through without labor consent, about welfare being recast as charity, about surveillance being normalized as governance. Neoliberalism is not neutral policy. It is a full ideological impact. It re-engineers the citizen into a consumer and the state into a broker. Authoritarianism, too, has changed its clothing. It does not arrive with boots and barricades. It arrives as efficiency, as nationalism, as cultural pride, as digital convenience. Dissent is not banned. It is delegitimized. We have seen what happened 5 years ago during the 2020 Delhi riots. There were just some of them who were arrested. The rest of them are scot-free. They're people with severe criminal charges, but who come out on parole after parole after parole, and they are convicted criminals of rape, of murder, but we see them marching out very proudly, whereas some of the people who dissented in a very non-violent way are behind bars, and we do not know whether bail is in order or not, simply because they were unapologetically very, very expressive and very political about what they stood for. Now, Kerala offers a lesson that India cannot afford to ignore. Kerala shows that welfare is not charity, it is dignity. That public goods are not inefficiencies, they're foundations of freedom. That decentralization is not administrative fashion, it is democratic strength. That secularism is not appeasement, it is equal citizenship. Kerala's achievement, be it literacy, be it health, be it social security, be it resilience, it did not emerge from market goodwill. It emerged from political struggle and ideologically decision-making. They emerged because people were organized. And people demanded that struggle. Governments were brave enough down the years to take on these challenges and to defend all that is stood for. So Kerala is not just a museum of the past, it is the playbook for India, and I'm iterating that once again. The task is not to project Kerala as an exception. The task is to translate Kerala's ethics into a national political language again. Because models do not travel through statistics alone. They travel through narrative. And through the confidence to say this again, we can build an India where justice is not just a luxury, it is a necessity and a basic right. If Kerala is a playbook, then a playbook is not a scheme. It is a moral and administrative philosophy. It says, treat people as citizens, not as clients. It says, invest in public goods as the foundation of freedom. It says, build institutions that reduce the tyranny of private health over public life. It says, measure development by capability, not by spectacle. This is where scientific temper returns as political necessity. Scientific temper is not only about rejecting superstition. It is about expanding the idea through various discourses, be it symposiums, be it narratives, be it through talks, be it through lectures. It is by building institutions that fan a scientific temperament and the whole idea of questioning what has been so normalized and passed away as history. The danger today is that mythology is being peddled as history. And I think that becomes a fragile ground for furthering stories that have been previously termed as mythology, but today they are being passed off as history. A society that abandons scientific temper becomes very easy to manipulate, and we've seen that is happening. We've seen how, the current dispensation says this happened thousands of years ago, and this is the gospel truth, and this has to be put in the textbooks or NCERT. Let's include this chapter. Let's remove the Mughals. It's very easy to remove 400 years of medieval history and say, no, these guys did not exist. Let's start renaming cities. Let's start renaming the various station trains. Let's start renaming Aligarh. Let's call it Harigarh. Let's rename, these other countries. Probably that time, the economy will do well just by renaming cities. Probably there'll be a certain political narrative that would agree with the rest of the country if we start removing the Mughals and make them the devil of the day. So that is a very dangerous trend, what is happening. So now, when we talk about the global left, there's been a beacon of hope with Mamdani becoming the mayor of New York. And for last couple of months, I think I was a little shrill in my campaign. And I was like, he's my mayor, but he's not my mayor because I live in West Bengal, Kolkata. And I think that is what everybody felt. The campaign was so personal. And it touched the heart of so many people, and that is why he's being talked about so much. So when we talk about the global left, I think a little ray of hope is the New York election, mayoral election. We need to build more solidarity like that across, states, across India, and build solidarity. And I'm very happy to see that the left has stood against the tyranny of US, against what happened to the Venezuelan president. In recent days, as I told you, that the global attention has fallen on Zoran Mamdani for a simple act. He wrote a letter to Omar Khalid, actually a couple of lines. I think it was played out in the media. How many of you saw that? A few lines, right? So whenever one thinks of him politically, the letter actually reminded people of something very easy to forget, that even when you cannot free someone immediately, you can refuse to erase them. And I think that is what the left is, known for. That Mamdani is not in a position to free Omar Khalid. But the fact is that he wrote a couple of lines. You tell me any other global leader who would have the courage to do that in today's day and age. Mamdani's early days as mayor have also drawn sharp responses from Israel's foreign ministry and praise from Palestinian rights advocates after he revoked certain municipal decrees and moved away from a contested definition used in the city policy debates. Whether one agrees with the choices or not, the episode shows something important, that the global right tries to police the boundaries of acceptable solidarity, and the global left keeps testing these boundaries in public. We also saw how Donald Trump publicly derided Mamdani over his religion. They called him, "You are a communist," right? And the attacks basically reflected a fear of politics that challenges these entrenched interests. Again, let's set aside the personalities. Let's look at the structure. Power ridicules what it cannot easily absorb, and it tries to make dissent look so ridiculous so that ordinary people feel embarrassed to agree to it. So when we speak of the global left, we are not doing any international romance. We are talking about a shared struggle against a shared structure, an alliance of neoliberal economics and authoritarian culture, stitched together by fear, stitched together by spectacles. Trump's politics is one face of that alliance. The Modi government's politics is another. Both project strength as theater. Both thrive on permanent mobilization against invented enemies. Both speak endlessly of national greatness while ordinary lives become more precarious. Both promise order and deliver polarization. Both celebrate development while undermining these very institutions that make development humane. The comeback that I was talking about in my book titled Comrades and Comebacks, the left has to speak about dignity of labor as freedom, not just as sacrifice. It must speak of redistribution as democracy, not just as charity. It must speak about public goods as rights, not as welfare. It must speak about secularism as safety, not just a political slogan. It must speak of scientific temper as survival, not a textbook virtue. It must make people feel that justice is not an abstract moralism. It is a practical plan for everyday life. And the left must go back to where it belongs, reorganization, reorganize. The union must expand beyond traditional sectors and organize the gig workers, the platform workers, the informal workers, the student bodies, the student movements. They should be treated as a symbolic youth wing and as democratic body that is so integral to the future discourse of our countries. Women's movements must be central, not just adjunct moments, because politics does not transform gender relations, cannot claim emancipation. Anti-caste politics must be treated as material justice, not as a cultural add-on. And to conclude my talk, ladies and gentlemen, the Indian left does not seek resurrection. It seeks reconnection through all spectrums of life. With workers who feel disposable, with youth who feel betrayed, with minorities who feel targeted every day, with citizens who feel unheard. We do not seek to return to the past. It's very important to build a new aspirational India with a new left that looks aspirational, that is a good blend of the past, that is also continuing with this present, and is completely, it looks at the future as something that needs to be owned, not as something that is to be done away with. The freedom movement did not dream of a republic where dissent is treated as treason. It did not dream of an economy where many are insecure, so the few can be unimaginably wealthy. It did not dream of politics where bulldozers became instruments of governance. It did not dream of a society where neighbors are taught to fear each other as policy. The future cannot be built on hate or the silence of the fearful. It must be built on the courage of those who dare to speak truth to power. And it is very important because the Kerala Assembly elections are a couple of months away, the West Bengal Assembly is a couple of months away, and it's very important because right now the middle ground has shifted too far from the common citizen. We do not seek to return to the past, we seek to build a future where justice is not just mere luxury, where dissent is not a crime, and where the bulldozer is never used as a tool of governance. So with the spirit of this, and the ones who stand at barricades, who are rotting in jail, the conviction of international solidarity, the resilience of activists who refuse to be erased and turn them into a national movement, a red salute to all of them. And let us speak again, let us organize, let us govern again. Inqilab, Zindabad, thank you so much, Kerala. Thank you so much, KLIBF, for having me here for such a pivotal talk. Thank you so much. And available in the stalls, if you happen to see me there, I'll be happy to author sign it for you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Audience, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask now. Anyone?
Yeah, sure. Can some volunteer pass the mic here? Yeah, please give your name.
My name is Salman. I'm coming from Trivandrum itself. Ma'am, as all of you know that our country is going to eradicate left-wing extremism, and the government is declaring that the country will be free from left-wing extremism by 2026. But the way we are going to achieve such a dream, either through welfareism or development or infrastructure activities in such regions, is okay. But the way we are going, that is to assassinate or kill these people through encounters, is somewhat controversial. So how can a strong left can fight against these left-wing extremism? Or the state is claiming that it is okay, that is legitimate to kill through these encounters or use force in such a region. So my question is that how can a strong left can fight against these left-wing extremism, such an ideology which is rooted in leftist ideologies or communism?
See, we all know today that when we talk about the Naxals or the ultra-left, it's a little controversial. So I don't want to get in there. You know what is happening. Anyone who takes away life, I think, because right now we are not in the middle of an armed revolution. Let's be very clear. We are revolutionary. We are revolutionary in our spirit. We are speaking truth to power against the government, but we are not stepping out with guns, and it is not like the Gadar movement. It is not the Indian freedom struggle. It is, again, a very, very important struggle, I say, in 2026 again, 2025, to reclaim the political discourse. It is like a freedom struggle. But we need to understand that years have gone by since, our revolutionaries were treated as brave hearts. Today, if somebody does that, you'll be in jail. Let's have some clarity there. So we can't bring a revolution in that way. We have to look at what is prescribed and do our best what we can, be it as a civil rights activist, be it a political party. The idea is to organize. Even if you're dissenting, we need to be a little careful about the law. We've seen the price that some of our bravest activists are facing, or rather even facing today. They've been denied bail, and they're back in jail. And 5 years is not a small matter of time. It's a very, very long, drawn, it's a Herculean task. So I would not be the best person to comment about the ultra-left and the violence of it, but I would say, need be, the left today is very clear on it that they're not going to resort to any means of arms and armament or violence to fight the powers to be.